Hello guys, welcome to Concept Learning. So today we are seeing part 3, that is web application architecture and hosting ASP.NET application in IIS Server. I'm Amol Velikar. So let's start. So in this part we are going to discuss about the web application architecture and hosting ASP.NET apps in IIS Server. So what is IIS Server? What is architecture used in a web app, so that we will discuss in this part. So let's start with the web application architecture. So basically this is a theoretical concept, but it is also very important to know how your application work at background, what are the infrastructure it is used for that. So this is very important to know while developing the ASP.NET application. So here uh, in web application, our whatever application that is deployed on a web server and we are accessing through it web client. So here web client is nothing but web browser that will access the web resources from the server using URL. So uh, for example, whatever we access through mobile, computer, laptop, and different devices which contain the web browser, using that we will access the web application. So our web browser, that is Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Internet Explorer, that is a nothing but a web client. By using that we are accessing different number of services. So this is a main advantage of this web applications. At client side it requires minimum software requirement, means it requires only web application. If this thing is not there, then what will happen, for each and every services we require the separate application at client side. For example, if you are using YouTube services, then you require to install the YouTube app. And if you are using map services, then you also require the map uh, software installations or different type of service. Whatever services we are accessing, that you need to install at client side. So the the main advantage of web application is what, minimum requirement at client sites, means we require only web browser. By using that we are accessing the all services with help of URL. So how it's work, that is major part. So here in that there are different terms like web server, web client, and web resources. So web client will access the web resources that is present on web server with help of URL. Okay, so in this diagram we have shown that this communication will be done using HTTP protocol. So our web browser will request the services. For example, uh, if you want to anyway, suppose www.google.com or facebook.com, so you are mentioning that in an address line of web browser, that www.google.com, facebook.com, these are the URL, uniform resource locators. So that URL we are mentioning in a web browser, so web browser make the request. So what will happen at background, actually we are accessing the web resources. So web resources are nothing but HTML, CSS, JavaScript file, or any dynamic files like in our applications, that is AXPX files. So these are the web resources, and we are accessing that web resources using browser. So where that web resources are present, that web resources are present on web server. So when we deploy our application, that will deploy on a web server that contain all these web resources like these static files like HTML, CSS, and dynamic file like ASP.NET files, or if you are using PHP then .php extension, if you are using JSP then .jsp extension. So different dynamic files are there that will be presented server side, and static and dynamic both are present deployed on server using URL. URL is nothing but uniform resource locator. So that will be uniquely pointing to the this each and every resources present on web applications. So in URL we are mentioning the resource full path, and we are accessing that resources through browser. So in this diagram we have shown the another part, that is DNS server. So what is role of DNS server? Basically in internet we are accessing the data from the web server. So these are the different computers present, or different devices present at different locations in internet. Whatever the communication done, that will done through the help of IP addresses. So we are communicating to the server using URL. So this, for example, this is a URL, and this contains a character. So for example, https tcms.goe.in/home/homepage.xps. So this is a requesting the homepage.xps page from this site. Okay, so this web resources is access mentioned in a URL in a browser, with this web browser. If you are using Chrome or Mozilla Firefox, whatever you browser is, in that we are mentioning that, then that is a mention in a character form. So the role of DNS is what? It will take this URL and find out the IP address of web server using this URL. So it will check. So this is domain for this dcsem.mahaonline.goe.in. So it will find out the IP address for this web server. On that, this web application is deployed. So that mapping is done at this DNS server. So DNS server will reply the IP address back to this devices or application computer. Then that IP, using that IP address, your computer connect with this web server. So the role of this DNS server is to give the IP address of the web server by taking input as a URL. Okay, so when the device will get the IP address, so then it will point to the web server, and through this IP address and whatever the remaining part, that home/page page.axps. So home, on that web server there is a home subdirectory. In that there is a page called as a homepage.axps. So that web resources will be reply back to the uh, web client. So here uh, there are different type of web server resources using, that is a static resources and dynamic. So what is basic difference between that? So static resources uh, like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that is understandable by the web client or web browser. So whatever the browsers we are using, Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, they will understand this HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and they will directly render this HTML page and CSS page, that in a browser. So these are the static. If we are requesting the static resources, for example, in your URL content, suppose www dot AAA.com slash index.html. So that is a HTML static page. It will go to the web server. A web server contain that index.html web page that will reply back into the web browser. Web browser will render it and display it. So it is a static. There is nothing happening. Then what is dynamic web resources? So dynamic web resources, the web server will generate output for these dynamic web resources, and that output file will convert it into the HTML and CSS, and that will send it to the web client. So dynamic web resources, that is AXPX file, PHP file, and if you are using Java, then JSP files. So these are different dynamic resources. So by using that, what will happen, whatever the dynamic part are there, so database connection and all that will done here, and that will generate the output in a form of HTML and CSS, and that will, and then it will send to the client. So these are the type of resources. So on the basis also, we can have different type of technologies, that is a server side web technologies and client side web technologies. So what are the client side web technologies? So client side, that means it will be understandable by the web clients, that is web browser, whatever our Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Internet Explorer, Opera. So these are the client side technology like HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So these technologies are understandable and directly executed on the web client, that is on the browser. So whatever the HTML page, browser will understand and render it by the web browser. So directly this file will be rendered at a web browser. This, whatever the technologies, HTML, CSS and JavaScript. In server side web technologies, where develop dynamic web resources programs. So whatever that contains, suppose this, whatever the ASP.NET, JSP and PHP, these are the server side technologies. So they will develop dynamic programs. So that will generate dynamic outputs. For example, so whatever the database connection is, you are taking the data from the database and you want to show it on the web page, so that will taken handled by using this ASP.NET, JSP and PHP. So that is not possible with this HTML and CSS. So these are the HTML, CSS static file. If you are requesting the HTML file, then that will be directly take that file and send it to the web client. But if it is a dynamic resources, so this that is, suppose AXPX file is there, so that contain the database connection part and all dynamic parts are there. So if you are accessing the AXPX file, so that will uh, done the whatever the dynamic part, develop a dynamic programs for that, and then generate the output in the form of HTML, and that will send it to the client. So main thing here is what, the web client only understand the HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Okay, so he doesn't understand the AXPX file. What is AXPX file, what is PHP file, what is JSP file? He don't know about that. So he only know the HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So whatever the uh, server side web technologies files are there, they will generate the program that will generate the output in the form, final output generated in the form of HTML, CSS and JavaScript, and that will send it to the client. So here all things are done. So while doing this communication, main communication is done between what, our browser and web server. There are n number of web servers are there, and a number of services we are accessing. So our Google web servers are differences, Facebook web servers differences, whatever the web application that is deployed on a web server, and we are accessing that web server through from the web client. So major here, the communication protocol is used is HTTP. So browser understand different protocols also, HTTP, FTP, SNTP, but main protocol is used here, majorly is used, that is HTTP, that is stands for hypertext transfer protocol. So here it is a stateless protocol. Means what happened? So it will make first browser, for example this is a URL http.dsm online dot, this will access this homepage.axpx web resources. Okay, or suppose any static web page there, suppose HTML web page is there. So so this request URL request contains the suppose index.html, and that will make a HTTP request, then server will give that whatever the static index.html back to the client, then connection has over. So next time when again that same client will access the uh, another page from the same site, suppose home.html, so at the second time that web server doesn't know about the previous web requested done by that client. So web server doesn't maintain any state information about the web clients. So that's why we can say HTTP is a stateless, only request response will be happen. So web client will make a web resource request through HTTP, and web server will give the HTTP response, then here communication, all communication will be done. So it doesn't maintain any state about any particular client. So here you must think not only about the one client. So we are accessing a website that will be accessed by n number of people. For example, Facebook. So Facebook is accessed not only by one person, it will be accessed by the multiple people. So whatever the our web application that will be deployed on a web server, and that is accessed by the multiple clients. So we are saying that HTTP is a stateless, means what? So it doesn't maintain any state about the particular users. So whatever the clients, thousands or crores of clients are there, that state is not maintained by using the HTTP. So for that purpose different mechanisms are also used. Okay, so this is about the HTTP DNS server web servers. So there are different web servers are there. For example, for web client you are using the different web browsers also, or like Google Chrome is there, the software Opera is there, Firefox is there. Similar type on web server, there are different web servers developed by the different companies. For example, Microsoft has its own web server called as a IIS server. So that is a Windows server, and this IIS stands for Internet Information Services. Then another this JSP and PHP, they also use the another server, that is Apache HTTP server. They also deploying the web application. So here main role is done by the web server. Means what? Handling these thousands or crores of clients request and response, that is mainly done by the web server. So here in this our scenario, when we are developing ASP.NET applications, so background it uses the IIS server, so Internet Information Services, that is developed by the Windows. So this handles the whatever the web client request and response, and all the managing tasks that will be done by this web server. So our final web application will be there, and that is deployed on a web server. So on a web server we deploy means what? We are deploying it on this IIS server or Apache HTTP server. So that contain this, these are the web servers. Okay, so this is about a web server. So URL simply, that is Uniform Resource Repository, is defined as the global address of documents and other resources on World Wide Web. As we see that this is a address of documents and resources, that is of web resources, means homepage.xps index.html. So you may think that when we are mentioning in suppose any website is there, suppose www.xyz.com, so in that we are not mentioning the file name. So at that time what will happen, so there are some default file will be there that is set for this specific URL. Means suppose www.abc.com, when you enter, so it will go to that server, and in that for that specific web application there is a default file, suppose index.html is there, that will be sent back to the clients. So that will be happen. So this is a full URL that will contain the file name also. So this contains this dynamic web resources, that is homepage.axpage also. So in this URL it will requesting the homepage.axpx using this URL. So where this URL will be typed, that will be typed in the web browser, and where it is a web browser, that make you are accessing through mobile also, through phones, tabs also, you can access to laptop or computer. So these are the number of devices from that we are accessing these services. Okay, so that is about the web application architecture. So uh, here main thing is whatever we are accessing while developing your application, you have to think on that point of view. Means there is a web server, web client, and in that way, because whatever the development will done, that will be done on our one machine. So whatever we are developing, for developing purpose we are developing on a laptop or computer, so that will be done at one plus. But here scenario is what, in that it will contains the web server, client, and uh, but that architectures, all these things comes here also in one place. But in real time, the web server has different places, DNS servers at different places, and there are n number of web clients or browser that will access that web's application through mobile, laptop, computer, by different types of browser, Opera, Chrome, Firefox, and that will access that web application. So here that scenario you have to consider while developing the application, so you will be better understood a different concept that will be using the future. Okay, so that's about the web application architecture. Then next we see about the hosting ASP.NET web application in IIS server. Okay, so here what happened, uh, we think that is IIS, that is Internet Information Services, that is a server that is developed by the Windows. So in this scenario, when we are developing our web application, that will be deployed where, that is on a web server. So in that our scenario, we are using the Microsoft Windows server, that is IIS server, Internet Information Services. So finally, we are developing application using Visual Studios. So where is the IIS server? So in nowadays, may in Visual Studio that contain the inbuilt IIS server, that is called as a IIS Express. So let's see with the example. Suppose if we develop application using Visual Studio, so here scene is what, our what Visual Studio is a IDE, so that will take care all these things majorly. So it is integrated development environment, so that will handle the task of editing, debugging, compiling, and all that things comes at done at a one place. So you are not recognizing what will happen at the background. So suppose we are creating, suppose new application project new, and we are selecting this a web, then ASP.NET web application, and then choose the location where you want. So in that I will give the name, that is web hosting. Okay, give any name, then suppose empty file, and we will create this. Okay, so we are creating the project. So this is simple blank project, and in that we are creating the that different web resources. So there are two types of web resources as we see, that is a dynamic web resource and static. So static means it is a HTML, CSS and JavaScript, and these are the static files. Why it is static? Because that is directly understandable clients. When we send that directly file to the web clients, that is for browser like Chrome, Opera, they will directly render that files. But um, here there is a file name, the folder name is a very large, that's why it's creating problem. So we will save it on the different location. Suppose for example I will store it on the T, and here we will create folder that is test, and this will select folder. Then we will create web test demo. Okay, okay, this is for the previous, and we will create simply empty application. Okay, so static pages will be directly given by the web server to the client, but in the dynamic web pages they have different scenario. So that project is created. Now we require the solution explorer to add some files, so we'll add one file. Suppose add, I will add a simple waveform into that. So that is here see we can add a static part, this HTML, JavaScript and style sheet directly form. So I am adding the waveform as we seen previously. I will give the name that is uh, test hosting. Okay, so that will create the waveform into this web hash, and extension is what, this is a AXPX extension, so test hosting.xps. So this is ASP.NET application. So I will make it simple in a h2 tag, so that will be more. Okay, so this is a simple HTML part we have added in a AXPS page. So AXPS page is you want to see in a design part also, here it will show the design. This output look like this. This is a ASP.NET application. Okay, so here main concern is what, where is your web server? So we are saying that in Visual Studio they have the inbuilt web server. So when we run here you will see that this is an inbuilt web server of the Visual Studio, that is called as IIS Express. That when you install the Visual Studio, by default it comes with this IIS Express. So that will handle the all tasks of the web server. So this is a IIS Express. So this will run this application through this IIS Express. When we click on that, it will, this web application will deploy on this IIS Express web server, and we are accessing that deployed application from the web browser, that is Chrome. In that we are mentioning the URL, that then that file will be accessed. So test hosting we are accessing. So after running, so all these things will done at one place, so you are not able to recognize. So backgroundly what will happen, so there is a web server and web client. In our scenario, web server and web client present on a base same machine. So web server, here it is a IIS Express, that is a inbuilt IIS server. And web client is what? This Chrome. In that Chrome we are running this application. See here the URL. So main thing is what? URL. So this is uniform resource allocator. So in that, what we are requesting? We are requesting the test hosting.axpx file from this localhost money. So this is what is this localhost? This localhost is pointing to the same computer, because our web server present on the same. If it is on a different machine, then IP address of that machine. Then what is this 50210? So this is a port number uh, on which we are accessing. So IP address and port number that will pointing to this application. So this is auto generated port number. And then next we are mentioning this is a slash. Then next we are mentioning the test hosting.axpx. So this is a full URL that will access the web resources that will present on the web server. So here our web server is what? IIS Express. So when you see here, this will be run this at this IIS Express at a runtime. When we run this Visual Studio application, this IIS server run on that, our application, this whole application will be deployed on that IIS server. And when we run this you are it will open this browser. And in that, this is a browser, is a web client. In that we are mentioning this URL that is automatically added, and then requested page will be reflected back. So we are host calling the test hosting.axpx page, and then it reply give back. So this is a inbuilt IIS server. Suppose if you want to host application on IIS server separately, so real time that will done like that. So we are not using inbuilt IIS. This is for the development purpose. They provide this IIS Express. Real time this application will be deployed on a web servers, that is IIS Internet Promotion. So how the hosting of ASP.NET web application will be done on an IIS server. So this is a property window where we click on this, right click on this project, go to the properties, and here it will see, go to the web tab. In that we are going to see the servers. So these are the where you are going to deploy on this server. So default it is a IIS Express, that is inbuilt, and this will see here it is that port. So you can change this also, project URL localhost 50210. Now I want to deploy it on the IIS server. So here main is what is IIS server. So that first you require to install. If it is installed on your machine, then and then only this create virtual directory, and this will be available, this local IIS and external hosts. So how to check that you IIS is installed on machine, on your machine or not? So for checking that, you can simply open the browser, any browser, and in URL type simply http colon localhost. So this will be open when you type this only http localhost. And if you are seeing this page, then this is internet information services. This is homepage. So if this page will be shown, then your IIS is installed on your machine. If we are it's showing 404 or page not found, then in that your machine IIS is not installed. So if your machine doesn't contain any IIS, then simply install. How to install that? So to install the internet information services server, IIS server, simply go to the control panel, start control panel, then go to the programs and futures, programs, in that programs and futures, and simply here you will see the turn windows on, futures on or off. So in that, click on that, turn windows futures on or off. So that will be present on programs and futures. This is for installation of IIS server. So here in that list you will see that this is IIS, Internet Information Services. So simply click on that. In my machine I have already installed, so simply click on that, and for your convenience take check all these points, checkbox. So majorly here required IIS console, IIS managed services, and in worldwide we require this common. So if you confuse about that, simply check all this checkbox in this under this IIS, that is Internet Information Services. When you click on that, this IIS information server, and click OK, then it will install the IIS server on your machine. So your machine contain the web server. When you install that IIS, so it contain the IIS web server, so it will act as a web server. Okay, so click on OK, then it will install. And to check that your IIS server installed, simply go to the browser and localhost. And how to open the INET manager, click on start, then IIS, simply if you type, then it will show that in IIS manager console. When this will be happen, when you install that IIS server, so IIS Internet Information Service Manager, click on that. So this is a separate web server we have installed. So previously what will happen in Visual Studio, they have inbuilt web server, that is IIS Express, so all those tasks will be handled. So now what we are going to do, this we are in real time, there is a separate web server. In that separate web server, this IIS, suppose if you are taking Microsoft, then IIS server is installed. So this is a IIS manager, Internet Information Service Manager. So in that, this will be happen. So here it will, there are connection, you see that laptop, this is a name of my computer, this AMOLED laptop, that is a name of my computer, then Lenovo, that is a username, that is administrator username. Then here you see the application full folder, and then sites. So then site, in that contains the default website. In the default website it will contain these different application. So suppose this default website will be open. If you right click on that, manage path and advanced setting, if you go to the advanced setting, if you see the physical path of this default website, that is / system drive, then / inetpub, then / www.root, means this is a physical path where this application is deployed. This is a default website. So if you go on that path, then you realize that this is a file, whatever you save that internet information file, on this path available. So system drive means by default, system drive in my machine it is a C, it may be anything D or any. So instead of mentioning the specific drive, it will mention the system drive C, inetpub and www. So I will show that file to you, so that will be understand. It will be on C, inetpub, www root. So in that it will contain this HTML file, see IIS start. So this, if you open this file directly from here, this will be similar like this when you run the local host. So this file will be run when we type this as a local. So here if you see path, this we mention the localhost / only, and we open this here only open the same file, HTML file. Okay, and here we are directly open that file from that folder, C inetpub www root IIS start. So what we, so this file will be directly accessible, and this is accessed through web server, that is IIS web server. And how it is possible? In that web default website, it will, physical path will be mentioned as that. So what, if you want to deploy your application on IIS server, you can deploy at anywhere. So now we will see the how the static page, any suppose HTML page we will create and we will deploy it on the web server. So simply I want to store another page, I will create HTML page. Simply I will open the notepad. Okay, on notepad I will type simple HTML file, suppose HTML, then HTML, that's in that simply I will, a static page we will create, suppose body slash body, and in that we write suppose h1 tag welcome in ASP.NET. So this we will create a static HTML page. So how we can, so for that I will store this file HTML on that path. So where it is on C inetpub www root. This is a default utility that, and in that I will mention suppose uh, test.html. So testing this HTML page. So test dot, here it is CIS ratart. So test.html will say. So this will create. You do not have permission because we require the administrative permission for that. So you like another location? No. So here notepad we require to run as administrator. So I will save it. Okay, notepad, because on a C drive we require the administrative place to store that on that location, because it will store on a web server where the websites are deployed. On that location we are storing, that's why it's here. So C inetpub www root, and in that I will show test.html file. So this will create the HTML and will save. Okay, now it is a save. So this will create this another file, test file. I will open directly. If you open here, then it will see like this. This will be file open, but we are accessing that through web server. So I will IIS web server. So this will static, so it will contain the full path of that file. So how to access that from the IIS web server? Simply run any web browser. Suppose uh, I will open this Chrome. In that I will mention the full path. So how we are going to mention? So our web server present on the same machine, that's why we are using localhost. So we are accessing web application, so we are using HTTP protocol. So HTTP colon double slash localhost, then slash, if you click on that localhost, it will open our local host, that service web service. So our, we are want to access that file. So it is, what is name of that file? State test.html. So it will open that HTML file. See, welcome in ASP.NET. So it will open that. This is a static document. Simply directly reply given back that IIS server and save. So in this scenario, what will happen? Our web server and web client, all these present on same place. So this is our web server, IIS web server, and this web client that will present on web, and we are accessing this test.html resources default on website. So that will reply back and here. So then why instead of direct accessing file, why we are accessing through this IIS, it means local centers. So the main what, if you accessing this on same machine, then you can use localhost also, and this can be accessed to from another machine also. Suppose if you want to access this from the another machine that is connected to this computer or laptop, then in that here it will mention the IP address of this web server that contain this IIS. So IP address then slash test.html, then you can access over there also. So as it deployed on a web server, so if it is connected on the internet, then you can access on internet also. So we will deploy this application on the IIS web server. So this is a static HTML page you can access. Now our in our scenario we are developing application on Visual Studio. Then how this uh, Visual Studio application will be deployed on a IIS local server. So here by default it is using the inbuilt IIS server, that is IIS Express, but currently now we are not deploying this on the local host IIS Express. We are choosing here, go to the how to open this. I will close that and I will show you again to you. So click on the web solution explorer, this project, right click on that, then go to the properties, then this property, on that property it will contain this web tab. On that web tab it contains this server section. In that we are uh, clicking, there are different options they are giving. This IIS Express means inbuilt IIS Express server. This local IIS will be, select that IIS for this. If you want to deploy over here, then check on this local IIS, so it will deploy on that side. Then it will show the what project URL want. So this is a URL for this our application web test demo, so that will deploy this application on this project URL. So this will be URL on that http colon localhost slash a web test demo, and this is create virtual directory. So what will happen if you have installed in your machine, if it is IIS installed, then and then only this option will come. Otherwise this option will not come if only contains the IIS Express. Or if you are only Visual Studio, then it will contain the IIS Express. If you are not separately install IIS server, then this option will not come. So for this we require to install the IIS server, and that we have seen. So this is a project URL for this web server when it is deployed on server. So by this will be deployed, and click on this create virtual directory. See, now there is a no virtual directory. So why we are creating virtual directory? Basically, if you want to deploy application on a web server, so you must require to place it on this root folder, like this test and all. Suppose if you want to place this file on different location other than this inetpub slash www root, then you require to create a virtual directory for that. So from here also you can add a virtual directory, and in that you will mention that path like this. um, Here for the site you have mentioned that path, and so add a virtual directory and then physical path you have to mention, that will be place that file on another location and access like this. So similar kind, when you clear here add a virtual directory, that will be done from Visual Studio here. So when we are mentioning here, selecting the local IIS project file name and creating virtual directory, this will create virtual directory here. So here it will create the virtual. Now see, in our web default website it will contain test tab web 7. Now when we click on this create virtual directory, this will create. So for creating this virtual directory, again we require the administrative privileges. So for that purpose, because we are deploying the application, so for that purpose what you have to do, we have to run this Visual Studio as a administrative privileges. So I will close the Visual Studio, then changes will be revert back, and again I have to open that Visual Studio as an administrative privilege, then and then only it will. Because what will happen, this is a web server and we are trying to deploy our web application on web server. So I will open Visual Studio, right click on that Visual Studio, and here run as a administrator. So I am running that Visual Studio as an administrator. Then it will say here yes, it will open that Visual Studio as administrator previous, so that we are able to create a virtual directory on the IIS server. So what we are doing, we are deploying our VSP or .NET application on the IIS server. So now suppose this is our project, recent project, it will click on that, or this will open that project whatever we have created, and we are going to deploy this web application on IIS server. So this IIS server is a separately, okay, not the inbuilt IIS Express. So click on this project, right click property web, then here server, choose the local IIS server. So this path will be created default, and then create virtual directory, click on that. So this will done automatically, so it will create so see, virtual directory was created successfully. Now you will see this web test demo on this. If you refresh, so in default website, see here, this will create a separate virtual directory, that is a web test demo. And if you want to browse this also, you can browse this application also from here also, or you can run it from the uh, uh, this Visual Studio. So I will run this. So when you change this and if you save this will create virtual directory, and here you will see previously it will come IIS Express, now it will come as a local IIS and Chrome. So when you run this application, this will run as a local IIS, and URL will be like this: localhost, that is your web server IP address, that is localhost and web server. So this will, if you click on that, then this application now it will run from the IIS. Here it will not come the IIS Express now. See, previously it will come the IIS Express, but now it's not, because we are deploy this application on IIS, Internet Information Service, separate, and this IIS is on the same machine. So what will happen? Our web server, that is IIS server, and as client, that will present. And see, previously URL will be different, now URL will be different. Why? Because previously it will use the localhost colon port number and then file name directly, but now see this URL: localhost web test demo, that is virtual directory name, and then that file name test hosting.axpx, and then this reply will be given. So you can run like this also from the web browser, and from another browser also you can check. So this will open on here. So here we will run that file localhost web test demo, but we require to mention that file name, that is a test hosting.xps, because it will we require to mention the full path of that file. So now it will open that test hosting. Okay, so that's it about this. So we deploy host our ASP.NET web application on the IIS server. Thank you for watching.